Jason never missed a chance to crush Emily. To him, she was nothing more than a nameless, insignificant assistant, someone safe to mock, easy to humiliate. One day, as Emily silently cleaned the weapons, Jason pointed at her and sneered, "Look at that stupid woman." Laughter filled the room. Emily didn't react. She didn't defend herself. But behind her calm expression, something dark and powerful awakened. That humiliation didn't fade, burned, carving a single, unstoppable thought into her mind. From that moment on, Emily stopped being just a target. She became a strategist. She observed, waited, and planned in silence, turning every insult into fuel for a revenge no one could imagine. Jason believed he had broken her, but in reality, he had created his greatest mistake. What happens when the person everyone overlooks decides to strike back and reveals who she really is? But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story really began. The armory at Naval's Special Warfare Command echoed with male laughter. Emily Reese, 40 years old with calloused hands and quiet eyes, knelt on the concrete floor, methodically cleaning a Heckler & Koch HK416. Her movements were precise: disassembly, inspection, lubrication, reassembly. Muscle memory from thousands of repetitions. Jason Bennett leaned against the weapons rack, his BDU sleeves rolled to expose forearms thick with gym-built muscle. At 30, he carried himself like someone who'd watched too many war movies and not enough real combat. "Look at that stupid woman," Jason announced, his voice cutting through the space. "They let anyone work here now, huh?" The other recruits, 6 of them clustered around a table studying dive tables, looked up. A few snickered. One elbowed another. Emily's hands didn't pause. Upper receiver, bolt carrier group, charging handle. Her face remained blank, expressionless as concrete. But something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation, a decision point reached. "Probably doesn't even know what end the bullet comes out of," Jason continued, emboldened by the audience. He walked closer, boots heavy on the floor. "Hey, sweetheart, you need help with that? It's a man's weapon." She looked up then, just once, met his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. That's when Jason should have recognized something, the way she held his gaze, not defiant, not hurt, just assessing, like a sniper, calculating windage and elevation. But Jason was too busy playing to his crowd. Emily returned to the rifle. Chamber, gas tube, flash suppressor. Inside her chest, something ignited. Not anger. Anger was messy, impulsive. This was colder, methodical. The same feeling she'd had in Kandahar when identifying targets through a scope at 800 meters. She'd spent 3 months embedded as the assistant. 3 months watching these recruits stumble through Hell Week prep. 3 months being invisible. Gathering intelligence for the psychological warfare training program she was actually designing. Jason Bennett had just volunteered to be the primary case study. The rifle clicked back together. Function check complete. Emily stood, placed the weapon in its rack, and walked past Jason without a word. Her shoulder brushed his arm, a contact so brief it barely registered, but in her mind, the operation had begun. The door closed behind her with a soft, pneumatic hiss. In the hallway, Emily pulled out a small notebook from her cargo pocket. She wrote 3 words in neat, controlled handwriting. Operation, Quiet Reckoning. Jason's laughter still echoed from inside the armory. He had no idea he'd just made a fatal tactical error. Emily's office was tucked in the administrative wing, a place most SEALs never visited. Too much paperwork, not enough action, perfect cover. She sat at her government tissue desk, the kind with laminate peeling at the corners, and opened her laptop. The screen reflected in her reading glasses, a prop she didn't actually need. 40 years old, yes. But her vision was still 25 tenths, tested every 6 months. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She accessed the training database passwords she shouldn't have, but did. 16 years in naval special warfare left plenty of backdoors open for those who knew where to look. Jason Bennett's file appeared. Physical fitness scores: above average, not exceptional. Swim times: middling. Obstacle course: competent. Psych evaluation: displays strong confidence. May benefit from team cohesion exercises. Translation: arrogant with authority issues. Emily scrolled deeper. High school football star. State championship, full ride to a Division II school? Injured sophomore year, enlisted at 22. Now pushing through Bud as prep with something to prove. She created a second file, one that wouldn't show up in any official system. A ghost document. Inside, she began compiling observations. Jason's patterns. He arrived at PT 15 minutes early every morning, probably to claim the best rack position in the locker room. He always partnered with Marcus, the weakest swimmer, during buddy drills. Smart. Made him look better by comparison. He ate lunch at 11:45 exactly every day. Creature of habit. Habits were vulnerabilities. Her phone buzzed. Text from Commander Rollins, her actual supervisor. Psych training module draft due Friday. Need realistic scenarios. Emily smiled, a thin expression that never reached her eyes. She typed back, I have something in development. Real-world case study. Will exceed expectations. The next morning, Emily arrived at 0430. The base was still dark, just security lights casting pools of yellow across the tarmac. She slipped into the training coordinator's office. Her security clearance opened every door. She pulled Jason's training schedule. Then, she rewrote it. Nothing dramatic, just small changes. His pool session moved from 0800 to 0600 when he'd be tired, not warmed up. His land navigation exercise extended by 3 kilometers. His next weapons qual scheduled right after a 12-mile ruck march, death by 1,000 cuts. She saved the changes. They'd go unnoticed until Jason started feeling the pressure, wondering why everything suddenly felt harder. In the hallway, she passed Lieutenant Chun, one of the actual instructors. Morning, Emily, he said, coffee cup in hand. You're here early. Always am, she replied. Some of us don't need beauty sleep. He laughed and kept walking. Emily returned to her office. On her wall hung a single commendation, elaborately low-key. A Navy Achievement Medal for administrative excellence. Boring, forgettable. What wasn't on the wall? Her bronze star with valor, her purple heart. The classified operation in Syria where she'd held a position for 16 hours against insurgent forces, buying time for an extraction team. The Navy SEALs had 14 women attempting to make it through the pipeline. Emily had been the first to succeed, back when it was still technically prohibited. They'd buried her records under national security classifications. Now, she existed in the shadows by choice, watching, evaluating, and occasionally, when someone like Jason needed a lesson in humility, teaching. She opened her notebook again. Below operation, quiet reckoning, she wrote, Phase 1, pressure. Let him think it's bad luck. Outside, the sun began rising over the Pacific. The base came alive with running cadences and barked orders. Jason Bennett was probably still asleep, dreaming of glory. Emily was already 3 moves ahead. Jason hit the pool at 0600 AO, still half asleep. The water felt colder than usual, slapping against his face like a punishment. Bennett, you're dragging. Instructor Chavez stood at the pool edge, stopwatch in hand. Your time yesterday was 2 minutes faster. What's wrong with you? Jason pushed harder, arms burning. The early schedule was killing him. He'd stayed up until 2300 studying dive physics, thinking he had until 0800 to recover. The sudden change had come through on a system notification he'd barely read. He touched the wall, gasping. Chavez clicked the stopwatch and shook his head. Mediocre. Hit the showers. In the locker room, Jason punched the metal door of his locker. Marcus looked up from tying his boots. "You okay, man?" "I'm fine," Jason snapped. "Just tired." But it wasn't just tired. All week, something felt off. His gear inspections kept getting flagged for minor issues. Dust on his rifle stock, loose threads on his pack. His assigned study materials kept arriving late, forcing him to scramble. And now this schedule change that nobody else seemed affected by. At lunch, Emily walked past his table carrying a clipboard. She wore the same bland expression as always, mouse brown hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, oversized utility uniform hiding whatever shape existed underneath. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need to get the supply closet." Jason didn't move his chair, made her squeeze past. A petty power play. She didn't react, just shuffled by with that same blank face. "Thinks she even knows we exist?" Marcus said, watching Emily disappear down the hallway. "Who cares?" Jason muttered. "She's nobody." That afternoon, land navigation exercise. Jason opened his assignment packet. 12 kilometers through rough terrain, 6 checkpoints, 4-hour time limit, standard. Except checkpoint 4's coordinates were wrong, off by 200 meters. He spent 20 minutes searching the wrong hillside before realizing the error. By then, he was behind schedule, legs screaming, dehydration setting in. He finished with 8 minutes to spare. Acceptable. Barely. Instructor Chavez reviewed his scorecard. Checkpoint 4 took you 23 minutes. "That's unacceptable, Bennett." The coordinates were clearly marked. "Sir, the coordinates were you not paying attention to your briefing?" Jason's jaw clenched. He'd checked those coordinates 3 times. But arguing with an instructor was career suicide. "No excuse, sir." That evening, he sat in the barracks with his head in his hands. Around him, other recruits joked and relaxed. Nobody else seemed to be having the week from hell that he was experiencing. His phone buzzed. Text from his girlfriend. "Haven't heard from you in days. You okay?" He started typing a response, then stopped. What would he say? That he was falling apart over nothing? That invisible fingers seemed to be turning screws he couldn't see? He deleted the draft and put the phone away. Across the base, in her small office, Emily made another notation in her notebook. Phase 1, complete. Subject showing stress indicators. Confidence deteriorating. She closed the notebook and checked her watch. The real test would come tomorrow. Weapons qualification right after a 12-mile ruck march. Jason would be exhausted, shaking, his fine motor skills compromised. Perfect conditions for failure. She shut down her computer and grabbed her keys. As she walked to her car, a forgettable gray Camry, she passed the barracks. Through the window, she could see Jason sitting alone on his bunk, shoulders slumped. No satisfaction crossed her face. No triumph. This was tactical, calculated, the same way she'd approached every mission in her career. She drove off base, stopped at a grocery store, bought a rotisserie chicken and vegetables. At her apartment, a studio with minimal furniture, she ate dinner standing at the counter. On her wall, a single photo, her graduating Bud S class, except she wasn't in it. The photo was from 6 months after her actual graduation when they'd integrated women publicly. Her achievement remained classified. She'd made peace with invisibility years ago. But that didn't mean she'd accept disrespect. She washed her plate, dried it, put it away. Then sat on her couch with a Bukhan Combat by Dave Grossman. Professional reading. She was on her 3rd time through. At 2100, she set the alarm for 0400 and went to bed. Tomorrow, Jason Bennett would begin to understand that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming. The ruck march started at 0430 in darkness. 45 pounds of gear, 12 miles through soft sand and rocky trails. Jason's shoulders burned by mile 3. His hip flexors screamed by mile 7. He crossed the finish line at 07:47, 23 minutes slower than his previous best. No time to recover. Weapons qual started at 08:00. At the range, his hands trembled as he loaded magazines. 30 rounds, 3 firing positions: prone, kneeling, standing, 40 targets at varying distances. Minimum passing score, 85%. First position, prone. His breathing wouldn't settle. The rifle sights wavered. He squeezed the trigger. Miss. Adjust. Fire. Hit. Miss. Hit. 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 His score, 73%. Instructor Chavez approached, face granite. Bennett. What the hell was that? Sir, I don't want excuses. I want performance. Chavez leaned closer. You're on my radar now, understand? One more substandard showing and you're out of this program. Jason's chest tightened. Out. After everything, after all the work, he looked down the firing line. Other recruits were packing up, chatting, laughing. Normal. Why was everything falling apart for him specifically? At the armory, returning his weapon, he saw her again. Emily. Cleaning rifles like always, invisible and irrelevant. Except this time, something nagged at him. The way she held the Edge K416? Too comfortable, too familiar. Not like someone who'd learned from a manual, but like someone who'd carried it through firefights. He shook his head. Exhaustion was making him paranoid. You okay, man? Marcus asked as they walked back to the barracks. Yeah, just need sleep. But sleep didn't come. Jason lay in his rack, staring at the springs of the bunk above him. His mind raced through the past 2 weeks. Every failure, every setback. Was it really all his fault? He pulled out his phone and opened his email. Scrolled through the administrative messages. Training schedule changes, assignment updates, equipment inspections. All sent from the same email domain. Training. Coordinator at NAB Specware Mill. He clicked on the sender details. Clune Generic Automated System. No individual name attached. But someone had to manage that system. Someone had to input the data. He thought about Emily. Quiet, invisible Emily who worked in administration. No, that was insane. She was just an assistant. She couldn't possibly, could she? He opened a new browser window and searched the base directory. Found the administrative wing organizational chart. There. Emily Reese, GS11 training coordinator. GS11. That was higher than he'd assumed for someone who just cleaned rifles. He dug deeper. Her official bio, 12 years of naval service. Multiple overseas deployments. Administrative specialist focused on training program development. 12 years, multiple deployments. As what? A yeoman? A supply clerk? The official record was deliberately vague. Jason sat up in his bunk. Around him, other recruits snored. He grabbed his laptop and logged into the training database. His own record. Every score, every evaluation, every assignment. He noticed something. His pool session time change approved by training coordinator. His land navigation coordinates issued by training coordinator. His weapons qual schedule set by training coordinator Emily. His heart rate spiked. Was she sabotaging him? But why? Because of a stupid comment 2 weeks ago? No, that couldn't be it. She hadn't even reacted. Unless. He closed the laptop. He was losing it, seeing conspiracies where none existed. Sleep deprivation was a hell of a drug. But when he finally drifted off at 02:00, his dreams were filled with gray corridors and invisible hands rearranging his life like chess pieces. The next morning, Emily arrived at her office at 0430 as usual. She made coffee cheap government blend that tasted like burnt rubber, opened her computer, checked Jason's recent performance scores, 73% on weapons qual. Right where she'd predicted. Phase 2 was working perfectly. Her phone rang. Commander Rollins. Emily, I need you in my office. 800. Yes, sir. She hung up and made another notation in her notebook. Then she pulled up a new document, began typing, psychological pressure testing, case study subject. It demonstrates predictable stress response patterns when subjected to controlled environmental variables. Confidence degradation occurring within expected parameters. Subject beginning to display paranoia and attribution errors, blaming external factors rather than personal performance. Academic language. Clinical, emotionless. But beneath the professional terminology was a current of something colder. 16 years of being underestimated. 16 years of men like Jason assuming she was furniture. She saved the document, encrypted it, filed it in a folder marked Training Development Classified. At 0800, she walked to Commander Rollins's office. He was 55, gray-haired, former SEAL with 28 years of service. One of the few who knew Emily's real background. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She sat. "I've been reviewing the training metrics," Rollins said, studying a report on his desk. "One of the recruits is showing unusual performance degradation. Jason Bennett. You know him?" Emily's face remained neutral. "I've seen him around. Seems confident. His instructors are concerned." Everything was fine, then suddenly 2 weeks ago his scores started dropping. Rollins looked up. "Any changes to his training schedule?" "Standard adjustments based on facility availability and instructor assignments," Emily said. Her voice carried the same bland bureaucratic tone it always did. Nothing unusual. Rollins studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Keep monitoring. If there's a systemic issue affecting recruits, I need to know." "Understood, sir." She left his office and returned to her own, closed the door, sat at her desk. For the first time, a smile crossed her face. Small, brief, gone in seconds. Jason Bennett was beginning to wake up to the game being played, but he was still 3 moves behind. And the real twist hadn't even begun. The knock on Jason's locker came at 2100, well past lights out. He opened the door to find Instructor Martinez, one of the senior training cadre, a career SEAL with 16 years of operational experience. "Walk with me," Martinez said quietly. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The base was quiet except for distant ocean waves and the hum of generators. Martinez lit a cigarette, took a drag, exhaled slowly. "You're drowning, Bennett." Jason stiffened. "Sir, I know my recent scores. I don't give a damn about your scores." Martinez flicked ash onto the tarmac. "I care about pattern recognition. You know what I see? A recruit who is solid suddenly falling apart. That doesn't happen randomly. I don't understand what you're... Someone's screwing with you, kid." Martinez turned to face him directly. "Your schedule changes, your assignment errors, your equipment inspections. It's too consistent to be coincidence." Jason's pulse quickened. So he wasn't crazy. Who would do that? Martinez took another drag, eyes distant. 10 years ago, we had a similar situation. Young hotshot recruit, cocky as hell, thought he owned the place, started mysteriously failing everything. Took us 3 months to figure out what was happening. What was it? One of the support staff, guy he'd disrespected. Turned out this support staff member had been Delta Forced before an injury forced him into an admin role. He systematically dismantled the recruit's confidence as an object lesson. Martinez crushed the cigarette under his boot. The recruit washed out. Never knew what hit him. Jason's mind raced back to 2 weeks ago. The armory, his comment, Emily's blank face. "Are you saying I'm not saying anything?" Martinez interrupted. "I'm telling you to open your goddamn eyes. And be smart about it. If someone's running an op on you, confronting them directly makes you look paranoid. You need proof, evidence, something concrete. How do I get that?" Martinez smiled grimly. "That's your problem to solve, Bennett. Consider it part of your training. SEALs don't just fight enemies they can see. We fight the ones hiding in the shadows." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Whoever's doing this, they're good. Real good. That should tell you something about who you're dealing with." He walked away, leaving Jason alone in the darkness. Jason stood there for 10 minutes, mind churning. Emily Reese. Quiet, mousy Emily who cleaned rifles and filed paperwork. Could she really be? He needed information. Real information. Not just vague administrative records. The next day, during lunch break, Jason made his move. He waited until Emily left her office for the cafeteria, then walked past her door. It was locked, as expected, but the window next to it was cracked open for ventilation. Too risky, too obvious. Instead, he approached the records office. The clerk, a young seaman named Rodriguez, looked up from his computer. "Help you?" "Yeah," Jason said, forcing casual confidence. "I'm trying to track down some old training records." Emily Reese, the coordinator. "I need to know her background for a project I'm working on." Rodriguez's fingers moved across the keyboard. Emily Reese. Let's see. GS11 Training Coordinator, hired March 2023, previous position was... Huh? What? Says here, Naval Special Warfare Command classified assignment. Rodriguez frowned. That's weird. Usually it lists the specific unit. Can you access it? Not with my clearance level. You'd need someone at 05 or above. Rodriguez looked up. Why do you need this? Just curious about her background. She seems overqualified for an admin role. Rodriguez shrugged. Above my pay grade, man. Sorry. Jason left the records office with more questions than answers. Classified assignment, Naval Special Warfare Command. Those weren't terms used for supply clerks or paper pushers. That afternoon, during equipment maintenance, Jason positioned himself near the armory where Emily was working. He watched her through the doorway, really watched her this time. The way she field stripped an M4A1, 11 seconds. Blindfolded, an experienced SEAL could do it in 15. She was faster. The way she checked the barrel for carbon buildup, running her finger along the chamber, feeling for imperfections invisible to the eye, muscle memory from thousands of repetitions. The way she carried herself when she thought no one was looking, shoulders back, head up, eyes constantly scanning. Not like someone afraid, like someone assessing threats. She noticed him watching. Their eyes met for 3 seconds. In that moment, Jason saw something he'd missed before. Her eyes weren't mousy or timid, they were calculating. Cold. The eyes of someone who'd looked through rifle scopes at human targets. She returned to her work without comment. Jason's hands went cold. That evening, he did something desperate. He broke into the base gym at 2,200 after hours, using his access card. The gym had security cameras, but he knew the blind spots. He'd studied them for weeks as part of contingency planning. He went to the training records storage room, old physical files that hadn't been digitized yet, years of documentation on every SEAL who'd passed through the command. He started with 2015, flipped through graduation photos, then 2014, 2013. In the 2012 file, he found something. A classified roster from Bud S. Class 297. Most of the page was redacted. But one entry caught his eye, a single line not fully blacked out. Reese, E. Special Operations Classification, records sealed per Seknov authority. Seknov, Secretary of the Navy, the highest level of classification. His hands trembled as he photographed the document with his phone. He was about to close the file when he noticed something else. A commendation report, partially visible through bad redaction work. Exceptional performance during Operation Redacted in Kandahar Province. Subject maintained defensive position for 16 hours against numerically superior forces, enabling successful extraction of Redacted. Recommended for Bronze Star with Valor. Jason's chest tightened. Emily Reese wasn't an assistant. She was a decorated combat veteran. and he'd called her stupid in front of an audience. He carefully returned the files to their exact positions and left the gym. His mind raced as he walked back to the barracks under harsh security lights. She'd been playing him. This entire time, every failure, every setback, every coincidence had been engineered by someone who'd spent years conducting psychological operations against trained enemies. He'd insulted a professional warrior who'd decided to teach him a lesson, and he was completely outmatched. In her apartment, Emily sat with her encrypted laptop, reviewing security camera footage. She watched Jason break into the records room, watched him photograph documents, watched the realization dawn across his face. She closed the laptop. Phase 2, complete. Phase 3 would begin tomorrow, but this time, Jason would know he was being hunted. That would make his inevitable breakdown even more psychologically useful for her training research. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Subject has discovered the operation's existence. Psychological pressure will now intensify. Expect increased paranoia, possible confrontation. Contingency protocols prepared." Outside her window, San Diego glowed against the night sky. Somewhere in those lights, Jason Bennett was probably lying awake, realizing he'd started a war he couldn't win. Emily turned off her lamp and went to bed. Tomorrow would be very interesting. Jason didn't sleep. At 05:00 exhausted and wired on energy drinks, he made his decision. He would confront Emily directly. Screw Martinez's warning about proof and strategy. He needed answers. He found her at 0530 in the equipment cage, inventory and climbing gear. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across rows of carabiners and ropes. "We need to talk," Jason said, blocking the doorway. Emily looked up slowly. Her expression remained neutral. "About? You know exactly what about." He stepped closer. "You've been sabotaging me, changing my schedules, screwing with my assignments. I found your file. I know who you are." For a long moment, she said nothing, just studied him with those cold, calculating eyes. Then she spoke, her voice quiet and level. "You found a heavily redacted document that proves nothing. What exactly do you think you know? That you're not some admin assistant? That you've been special operations? That you're using your position to destroy my career because I hurt your feelings?" Emily set down the climbing rope she'd been inspecting. She removed her glasses slowly and placed them on a shelf. Without them, her face looked different. Harder. The disguise of weakness removed. "Let me tell you what I know, Bennett," she said, each word precise as a rifle shot. "I know you arrive at PT 15 minutes early to claim territory. I know you partner with Marcus because his weaknesses make you look better. I know you text your girlfriend at exactly 14:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. I know you failed your land navigation because you didn't account for magnetic declination, despite it being covered in your pre-mission briefing. I know you blame your weapon's queel failure on fatigue instead of poor breathing discipline." Jason's jaw clenched. "You admit it then, you have been watching me." "I watch everyone," Emily replied. "It's my job. I'm a training coordinator. Observation and assessment are literally in my job description." "That's bullshit, and you know it." "Is it?" She tilted her head slightly. "Tell me, Bennett, what proof do you have? A rescheduled training session? Equipment inspections? Challenging assignments? Welcome to military training. It's supposed to be hard. The coordinates were wrong, were they? Or did you transpose the numbers while copying them? Easy mistake when you're tired. My weapons qual schedule is based on an algorithm that rotates recruits through different time slots to ensure fair distribution of fresh versus fatigued testing conditions. It's been in place for 3 years. Jason's hands balled into fists. She had an answer for everything. Plausible deniability layered so thick he couldn't penetrate it. "I heard you," he said finally, his voice dropping. 2 weeks ago, in the armory, I made a comment. A stupid, disrespectful comment. And that's when all this started. Emily's expression didn't change. "You make stupid comments to a lot of people, Bennett. Why would I be special?" "Because you're not who you pretend to be. None of us are." She picked up her glasses and put them back on. The transformation was instant, from combat operator to harmless administrator. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of here. You're going to focus on your training. You're going to stop seeing conspiracies in random events. Because if you don't, you're going to wash out. Not because of me, because you're becoming paranoid and unfocused." "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything," Emily interrupted. "But I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to continue my job, coordinating training, observing recruits, writing psychological assessments." She paused. "Assessments that determine who's mentally fit for special operations." The threat hung in the air between them. Jason realized with cold clarity that she'd just checkmated him. If he pushed this, filed a formal complaint, she'd bury him under psychological evaluations. Paranoia. Inability to accept responsibility for failures. Poor stress management. No proof. Just his word against a decorated veteran with classified credentials. "Why?" he asked, the anger draining into something closer to desperation. "If this is about what I said, I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I didn't know." "You didn't know," Emily echoed softly. "That's the problem, isn't it? You didn't know anything about me, my background, my experience, my capabilities. But you felt qualified to judge me anyway." She stepped closer, and for the first time, he felt small in her presence. "You saw a woman in an admin role and assumed she was nothing. Stupid. Worthless. So yes, Bennett, I've been teaching you a lesson. About assumptions. About respect. About understanding that the most dangerous operators are the ones you don't see coming. So what happens now?" Emily smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "Now you have a choice. You can keep fighting shadows and paranoia until you fail out. Or you can accept that you made an enemy you shouldn't have, take the hits, and prove you're strong enough to survive anyway." She moved past him toward the door. "The SEALs don't coddle people. We break them down to see what they're made of. Consider this an accelerated program." She paused at the threshold. "Your next assignment starts in 30 minutes. Long-distance swim. Open ocean. 4 miles. I suggest you hydrate." Then she was gone, leaving Jason alone in the equipment cage, surrounded by gear designed for climbing mountains and rappelling cliffs. All obstacles that suddenly seemed trivial compared to the one he faced. He looked at his reflection in a metal locker, saw a man who'd fundamentally misunderstood the battlefield he was on. At 06:08, Jason hit the water. The Pacific was cold and choppy, waves slapping against his face with each stroke. 4 miles. He'd done it before. He could do it again. But 20 minutes in, he realized his breathing was off. Panic, not exertion. His mind kept replaying Emily's words. The cold precision of her threat. The revelation that he'd been completely outmaneuvered. He pushed through it, forced his breathing to steady, focused on technique, catch, pull, recovery, breath, mechanical, automatic. When he finally crawled onto the beach 90 minutes later, Instructor Chavez was waiting with a stopwatch. "Time's acceptable," Chavez said. "But your form was sloppy in the back half. You let your mind wander." "Yes, sir." As Jason walked back to the barracks, dripping and exhausted, he saw Emily through a window. She was typing at her computer, glasses perched on her nose, looking every bit the harmless administrator. But now, he knew better. Now he understood he was in a war with no clear rules, fighting an opponent who'd already won most of the battles before he even knew they'd started. The question was, could he survive long enough to reach the end? 3 days later, Jason stood in Commander Rollins' office at attention. His service record lay open on the desk between them. Your performance has become a concern, Rollins said, his voice carrying the weight of 28 years of service. Multiple failures, declining scores. Your instructors report that you seem distracted, paranoid even. Jason's jaw tightened. Sir, I believe there may be external factors affecting your performance? Rollins finished. Yes, I've heard that theory. Instructor Martinez mentioned you've been asking questions about support staff, making accusations. Not accusations, sir. Just trying to understand. Understand what, Bennett? That special operations training is difficult, that it's designed to break you? Rollins leaned forward. Or are you looking for someone to blame for your failures? The words hit like a physical blow. Jason realized with sick clarity that this was exactly how Emily had predicted it would go. Any complaint he made would sound like excuse-making, paranoia, weakness. I take full responsibility for my performance, sir. Do you? Rollins studied him. Because what I'm seeing is a recruit who crumbles under pressure, who sees enemies in shadows. That's not SEAL material, Bennett. Sir, permission to speak freely? Rollins nodded. I made a mistake 3 weeks ago. I disrespected a member of this command. I'm paying the price for that mistake. But I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for a fair chance to prove I can overcome it. Something shifted in Rollins' expression. What member of the command? Jason hesitated. This was the moment. Say her name and he'd confirm his paranoia. Stay silent and he'd accept the punishment. Doesn't matter, sir. It's my problem to solve. Rollins regarded him for a long moment, then closed the file. You have 2 weeks, Bennett. 2 weeks to bring your scores back to acceptable levels. If you can't do that, you're out of the program. Dismissed. Jason saluted and left. Outside, the California sun beat down mercilessly. He walked across the base, passing clusters of recruits who seemed to have no problems, no invisible enemies, no psychological warfare grinding them down. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Dude, where are you? We're supposed to be at dive training. Jason checked his schedule. Dive training was listed for 1300. His watch read 12:45. He ran to the dive facility, arrived at 12:55, breathing hard. The instructor glared. Nice of you to join us, Bennett. You're on equipment check. Make sure every regulator is functioning properly. You have 30 minutes. Jason started the checks, but his hands were shaking, not from exertion, from rage. He was tired, so tired, of fighting battles he couldn't win, of an enemy who wouldn't show herself. He tested a regulator. The gauge showed proper pressure. He moved to the next one, then stopped, took a breath. This was the game. Keep him off balance, keep him reactive, keep him making mistakes while looking over his shoulder. He thought about Martinez's words. SEALs don't just fight enemies they can see. Fine. If Emily wanted to fight in the shadows, he'd prove he could operate there too. That night, Jason didn't go to the barracks. Instead, he went to the base library, a quiet building that closed at 2200. He found books on psychological warfare, on SEAR training, on the mental tactics used to break enemy combatants. He took notes, studied the patterns, started recognizing the methodology being used against him. Isolation. Make the target feel alone in their struggle. Unpredictability. Keep them off balance with random stressors. Gaslighting. Make them question their own perception of reality. He was seeing it now. The full architecture of Emily's operation. Over the next week, something changed in Jason. He stopped reacting emotionally, started treating each challenge as a tactical problem. When his schedule changed unexpectedly, he adapted without complaint. When equipment malfunctioned, he compensated with better technique. His scores began to stabilize. More importantly, his mindset shifted. He stopped seeing himself as a victim and started seeing himself as a student in an advanced class on psychological resilience. Emily noticed. In her office, reviewing the latest performance data, she saw Jason's improvement. Not dramatic, but steady, consistent. She made a notation, subject showing adaptation to stressors. Psychological resilience increasing. Operational effectiveness improving under sustained pressure. This was the inflection point she'd been waiting for. The moment when the target either broke completely or evolved. Jason Bennett was evolving. On Friday afternoon, Jason completed a 12-mile ruck march in his best time yet, then went straight to weapons qualification. His hands were steady despite fatigue, his breathing controlled. He scored 94%. Instructor Chavez reviewed his target. Better, Bennett, much better. Walking back from the range, Jason passed Emily in the hallway. She was carrying a stack of files, playing her role as usual. Their eyes met. This time, Jason didn't look away, didn't glare, just gave a small nod. Acknowledgement, not defeat, not surrender. Just recognition that he understood the game and was still playing. Emily's expression didn't change, but inside, she felt something she hadn't expected. Respect. The recruit who'd been arrogant and dismissive was learning humility. The man who'd assumed competence based on appearance was learning to see deeper. The student who'd blamed external factors was taking ownership of his development. This was the lesson she'd been teaching. But as she walked away, another thought occurred to her. What happens when he finishes learning it? Because Jason Bennett was no longer the cocky recruit who'd mocked her in the armory. He was becoming something more dangerous, a man who understood psychological warfare and had a personal motivation to master it. She'd created an adversary who was beginning to understand her methods. And in 2 weeks, his probationary period would end. If he passed, he'd continue in the program. If he failed, he'd wash out. Either way, Phase 3 needed to begin. The final test, the one that would determine whether Jason Bennett was truly SEAL material, or whether he'd been permanently broken by the lessons he'd learned. The envelope appeared in Jason's locker on a Tuesday morning. No marking, no sender. Just a manila folder tucked between his uniforms. Inside, a single photograph and a document. The photograph showed Emily in full combat gear plate carrier, helmet, M4 rifle, standing with a CAL team in Afghanistan. The mountains of Kandahar province rose behind them. Everyone in the photo had their faces visible except 2, whose features were deliberately blurred for operational security. Emily was one of them, but her posture, her gear placement, her position in the formation, it all screamed combat operator, not support staff. The document was a partially declassified after-action report. Operation Redacted, Kandahar Province. 2018 Objective. Redacted Result. Mission Success Notable Performance. SEAL Operator E. Reese maintained defensive position for 16 hours against numerically superior enemy forces. Estimated 40 to 60 combatants, enabling successful extraction of team under fire. Subject sustained minor shrapnel wounds but refused medical evacuation until mission completion. Demonstrated exceptional marksmanship, 38 confirmed KIA, tactical awareness, and mental resilience under extreme duress. Recommendation: Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart. Jason's hands trembled as he read it a second time. 38 confirmed kills, 16 hours under sustained combat. Not an administrator, not support staff. A certified door kicker who'd voluntarily stepped back into the shadows. But who had left this in his locker? He looked around the empty locker room. No cameras in this section, no witnesses. Someone had wanted him to see this, but why? That afternoon, during a break between training sessions, Jason saw Martinez smoking near the equipment shed. "Was this you?" Jason asked, showing him the photograph. Martinez glanced at it and smiled grimly. Wasn't me, kid. But I'm not surprised someone decided you needed context. Who is she really? Above your pay grade. Martinez flicked his cigarette. But I'll tell you what I know. 8 years ago, the Navy quietly started integrating women into SEAL teams. Not for publicity, for capability. They needed operators who could move in certain environments without triggering cultural alarms. Emily Reese was one of 3 women who made it through the full pipeline. 3? I've never heard of even one. That's because their records are classified. The program was experimental, politically sensitive. They buried the graduates under layers of operational security. Martinez's expression darkened. Of those 3, 1 died in Syria. 1 took a medical retirement after Iraq. Emily's the only one still active. She transferred to training development 2 years ago. Officially to design psychological resilience programs. Unofficially, to do exactly what she's been doing to me, Jason finished. You disrespected one of the most lethal operators in naval special warfare, Martinez said bluntly. A woman who's done things that would give you nightmares. And you called her stupid in front of an audience. So yeah, she's been teaching you a lesson. The question is, are you learning it? Jason looked at the photograph again, at Emily's stance, her weapon grip, the way she positioned herself in the formation flank security where the most dangerous angles existed. Why show me this now? Because you've improved, Martinez said. Your scores are coming back up. You're adapting. Whoever left that photo thinks you've earned the truth. He started to walk away, then paused. Or maybe they want to see what you'll do with it. That evening, Jason made a decision. He went to the administrative wing and knocked on Emily's office door. Come in, she called. He entered. She was at her computer, glasses on, looking like the same mousy administrator from 3 weeks ago. Except now, Jason saw the micro details, the way she sat, positioned to see both the door and window simultaneously. The coffee cup placed left-handed offside draw position. The wedding rings she wore but had no husband. A deterrent, not a relationship. Bennett, she said without looking up. What can I do for you? He placed the photograph on her desk. Emily looked at it for a long moment. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. A decision point reached. Where did you get this? Does it matter? She removed her glasses slowly. Yes, because if you stole it from classified archives, you've committed a felony. Someone left it in my locker, anonymously. Emily studied him, then the photograph. I see. 38 confirmed kills, Jason said quietly. 16 hours. Bronze star with valor. And I called you stupid. Yes, you did. I want to apologize. Do you? Emily leaned back in her chair. Or do you want to apologize because now you know I'm dangerous? Because now there are consequences for disrespect. The words cut deep because they were true. Jason had never thought twice about the comment when Emily was just an administrator. Now that he knew her background, suddenly it mattered. You're right, he admitted. If I'd known who you were, I never would have said it, but that's exactly your point, isn't it? I should have shown respect regardless of who I thought you were. For the first time since he'd met her, Emily showed genuine emotion. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, gone in an instant, but visible. You're learning, she said finally. Is the lesson over? Do you want it to be? Jason considered the question. 3 weeks ago, he would have said yes immediately. Now he understood that whatever Emily had put him through was preparing him for something real. Something that would matter when bullets were flying and lives were on the line. No, he said, I want to finish it. Whatever you have planned, I want to prove I can handle it. Emily stood and walked to her window. Outside, recruits ran obstacle courses under the afternoon sun. Young men who thought they knew what toughness meant. The final test happens in 4 days, she said, still looking out the window. It's a full mission simulation. Hostage rescue scenario. Live ammunition. Psychological stress. Augmentation. Designed to push operators to their absolute breaking point. I'll be ready, you won't be. She turned to face him. Because I'm going to be your target. The hostage you're supposed to rescue. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make you fail. Jason's pulse quickened. Why? Because in the real world, the people you're trying to save don't always cooperate. They're traumatized, panicked, sometimes violent. You need to learn how to operate under maximum psychological pressure while maintaining mission focus. She walked closer. And because I want to see if you've truly learned humility, or if you're just play acting for my benefit. What happens if I fail? You wash out, your SEAL career ends before it begins. And if I succeed? Emily smiled, a genuine expression this time, almost predatory. Then you'll have earned something very few recruits get, my respect. And a recommendation that you're psychologically fit for the most difficult operations we run. She extended her hand. Do we have an understanding, Bennett? Jason shook it. Her grip was firm, calloused. The handshake of someone who'd done thousands of pull-ups and climbed more ropes than he could count. We do. Good. Then get out of my office and start preparing. You have 96 hours. Jason left. Outside, the base hummed with normal activity, but nothing felt normal anymore. He'd just agreed to face his tormentor in a final test that she'd designed specifically to break him. In her office, Emily sat back down at her computer, opened an encrypted file and began typing. Subject has demonstrated significant psychological growth. Final evaluation will determine operational readiness. Scenario designed to test ability to maintain discipline under maximum personal and professional stress. Success probability, 40%. If subject passes, recommend for advanced warfare training pipeline. She saved the file. Then opened another window, the security camera feeds covering the training compound where the simulation would occur. 4 days from now, Jason Bennett would enter that compound as a recruit trying to prove himself. He would leave it either as a qualified SEAL candidate or a washout with a hard lesson learned. Either way, Emily Reese would ensure the test was thorough. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather forecast predicted rough conditions for the weekend. Perfect. 0400 hours. Saturday. The storm had arrived overnight, turning the training compound into a muddy maze of concrete buildings and tactical obstacles. Rain hammered down in sheets, reducing visibility to 50 meters. Schnud stood in full combat gear plate carrier, helmet, M4, with live ammunition. Night vision goggles mounted, but not deployed. Around him, 5 other recruits prepared for the same simulation. They didn't know his personal stakes in this exercise. Instructor Chavez briefed them in clipped, professional tones: hostage situation, single civilian, multiple hostile actors, building 3. You have 40 minutes to plan, execute, and extract. Rules of engagement are standard. Hostiles will return fire. Your actions will be evaluated for tactical proficiency, decision-making, and psychological resilience. What Chavez didn't say: the hostage was Emily Reese. The hostiles were experienced SEAL operators acting as enemy combatants. The ammunition was live, not training rounds, though loaded with frangible rounds designed to minimize lethal risk. Jason's heart rate was elevated, but controlled. He'd spent 4 days preparing, studying building layouts, practicing room-clearing drills, mentally rehearsing every scenario. But none of his preparation included what to do if the hostage actively worked against him. 30 seconds, Chavez announced. Final equipment checks. Jason verified his magazine seating. Chamber clear until they entered the hot zone. Safety on. Thumb position for rapid manipulation. Execute. The 6 recruits moved toward Building 3 in a tactical column. The rain was both ally and enemy. It covered sound but obscured vision and made surfaces treacherous. Marcus took point. Jason was third in the stack. As they approached the target building, gunfire erupted from a second-story window. Frangible rounds impacted the ground near Marcus's feet. He dove for cover behind a concrete barrier. The team returned suppressive, fire-controlled bursts. Textbook precision. Contact front. Second floor, window 3, Marcus called out. Jason's training took over. Muscle memory. He flanked right while 2 other recruits provided covering fire. Reached a side entrance. Breached it with a controlled kick. The door had been deliberately weakened for the exercise. Inside, darkness. Rain leaked through damaged ceiling tiles. Jason activated his weapon light, swept corners. Clear. Moved to the stairwell. Ascending stairs was the most dangerous moment in close-quarters combat. Minimal cover, maximum exposure. He took them 2 at a time, weapon up, scanning for threats. Second-floor hallway. 3 doors. Hostile fire came from the first room on the left. Jason fired back 3-round burst into the doorframe, suppressive, not lethal. A role-player hostile emerged with hands up, eliminated from the scenario. 2 rooms left. Behind him, Marcus and another recruit provided rear security. Jason moved to the second door. Tried the handle. Locked. Standard breaching protocol. Announce, explosive breach, immediate entry. But something stopped him. Emily would expect standard protocol. She'd plan for it. Instead, Jason moved to the third door. It was slightly ajar, too obvious. A trap. He returned to the second door. Placed his hand flat against it and felt vibrations. Someone moving inside. Multiple contacts. Decision time. He signaled Marcus. Flashbang. My mark. Marcus pulled the distraction device from his kit. Jason shouldered his weapon, nodded. Marcus pulled the pin and rolled the flashbang under the door gap, a technique that avoided exposing himself to pre-positioned shooters. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Bang. Jason kicked the door open and entered the room in a fluid motion. Smoke and disorientation. 2 hostile actors, temporarily stunned, recovering from the blast. He put controlled shots into both center mass, non-lethal zones per training protocols. Both collapsed out of the scenario, and there in the corner, hands zip-tied behind her back, clothes torn, makeup smeared to simulate trauma, Emily Reese. She looked up at him with wild eyes. "Don't touch me! Get away!" The acting was extraordinary. Genuine panic in her voice. Fight-or-flight response visible in every muscle. This was the test. Jason lowered his weapon, approached slowly. "Ma'am, I'm us. Navy, I'm here to extract you." No, you're one of them. Stay back." Emily scrambled away from him, genuinely fearful, or perfectly simulating it. Every instinct screamed at Jason to grab her and move. They were on a timeline. Hostile forces could reinforce at any moment. But he remembered Martinez's words. Sometimes the people you're saving don't cooperate. He holstered his sidearm, a deliberate show of non-threat. Kept his rifle slung across his chest but not pointed at her. "Ma'am, look at my uniform, the American flag. See it?" He spoke calmly, the way you'd speak to a spooked animal. "I know you're scared. That's normal. But we need to leave now. Can you stand?" Emily's eyes darted between him and the door. She was testing him, pushing his patience. In a real scenario, every second wasted increased the risk of mission failure. I can't walk. My legs." She gestured to her ankles, implying injury. Jason moved closer, slowly. Knelt down to inspect her legs. No visible trauma. She was lying. "Part of the test, I'm gonna check your legs, okay? Just to make sure nothing's broken." As he reached toward her ankle, Emily lashed out, a wild strike that caught him on the cheek. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to shock. Behind him, Marcus raised his weapon. "Should I secure her?" "No," Jason said firmly. "She's traumatized. Give her space." He sat back on his heels, maintaining distance. Blood from the scratch on his cheek mixed with rain and sweat. "Ma'am, I understand you're scared, but I promise you, we're the good guys. My name is Jason. I have orders to bring you home safely. Your family is waiting for you." Emily's expression shifted. The wildness receded slightly. "My family?" "Yes, ma'am. They sent us to get you. It was a gamble." Jason had no idea if Emily had family. But the psychology was sound. Give the hostage something to hope for, a reason to trust. Emily's shoulders slumped. The fight drained from her posture. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll go with you." Jason cut her zip ties with a knife from his kit, helped her stand. She leaned heavily on him, still acting, testing whether he'd maintain compassion or revert to impatient force. "We're moving out," Jason announced to the team. "Keep her between us in the formation. Marcus, take point." They exited Building 3 into the storm. Rain hammered down. Visibility was near zero. The 40-minute window was almost expired. Halfway to the extraction point, hostile fire erupted again, this time from an unexpected angle, flanking their route. "Contact right," someone shouted. The team returned fire. But Emily began screaming genuine-sounding panic that could alert additional hostiles to their position. Jason made a split-second decision. He pulled Emily down behind cover, shielding her body with his own while returning fire with his free hand. Awkward shooting position. Reduced accuracy, but it kept her alive. "Suppressive fire, push right," he ordered. The team maneuvered. The hostile actors retreated per their scenario instructions. Extraction point reached at exactly 39 minutes. Chavez stood there with a stopwatch and a clipboard, drenched in rain. "Clear," Jason announced. Chavez clicked the stopwatch. Time. Scenario complete. Emily stood up, no longer leaning on Jason. The traumatized civilian disappeared, replaced by the calculating operator. She wiped fake blood from her face and looked at Jason with an expression he couldn't read. "Debrief in 30 minutes, Chavez said. "Get cleaned up." In the locker room, Jason stripped off his gear. His hands were shaking, adrenaline crash. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Dude, that was intense. You handled that hostage situation like a pro." Jason didn't respond. He kept thinking about Emily's eyes when he'd shielded her with his body. For a split second, something had flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or recognition. 30 minutes later, they sat in the debriefing room. Chavez reviewed the footage on monitors, analyzing each decision. "Bennett, explain your decision to use a flashbang on door 2 instead of door 3. Door 3 was too obvious, sir. Felt like a trap. Door 2 had subtle indicators of occupation. Correct assessment. Door 3 was rigged with blanks and a recording device. You avoided a trap that would have cost you the hostage." Chavez continued through the scenario, critiqued shooting positions, praised the formation discipline during hostile contact. Then he got to the critical moment. "Bennett, the hostage struck you and refused cooperation. Why didn't you restrain her?" Jason chose his words carefully. "Because she wasn't a threat, sir. She was traumatized. Restraining her would have increased her panic and compromised mission success. Psychology matters as much as tactics." Chavez looked at Emily, who sat in the back of the room, now in dry clothes, glasses back on. "Commander Reese, your assessment?" "Commander. Not assistant. Not coordinator. Commander." Emily stood. Every recruit in the room suddenly realized they'd been operating in the presence of someone far above their pay grade. "Recruit Bennett demonstrated exceptional psychological awareness," Emily said, her voice carrying command authority that had been completely absent in her administrative persona. Under extreme stress, with a non-compliant hostage, he maintained discipline, adapted tactics, and prioritized mission success over personal frustration. He also showed tactical flexibility in threat assessment and was willing to place himself at physical risk to protect a vulnerable individual. She walked to the front of the room and looked directly at Jason. That is SEAL caliber performance. The evaluation board met 3 days later. Jason sat outside the conference room, alone, waiting. Inside, his entire file was being reviewed. Every incident, every assessment from the past 6 weeks. The door opened. Commander Rollins emerged. Bennett. Inside. Jason entered a room filled with senior officers. Commander Rollins sat at the head of the table. Emily sat to his right, in full dress uniform with ribbons that told a story Jason now understood. Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, Navy Commendation Medal with Combat 5. 2 Navy Achievement Medals. This wasn't an administrative assistant. This was a decorated combat veteran being revealed to the command structure. Sit, Rollins said. Jason sat. Rollins opened a folder. 6 weeks ago, you were a promising recruit. Then your performance collapsed. Your instructors reported concerns about your mental stability. You were placed on probation. He looked up. Explain what happened. This was it. The moment to either take responsibility or make excuses. I made a critical error in judgment, sir, Jason said carefully. I disrespected a member of this command based on superficial observations. That disrespect resulted in, let's call it, accelerated stress testing. I initially responded poorly, blaming external factors instead of adapting, but eventually I recognized that my difficulties were self-inflicted consequences of my own arrogance. Accelerated stress testing, Rollins repeated, glancing at Emily. Commander Reese, did you deliberately sabotage this recruit's training? Every eye in the room turned to Emily. She met Rollins' gaze without flinching. I adjusted certain parameters of his training schedule and assignments to create a more challenging psychological environment. Yes, sir. That's outside standard protocol. It's exactly within my protocol, sir. I'm developing a psychological resilience training program. Recruit Bennett volunteered, though not knowingly, to be a test subject. Volunteered by insulting you publicly, one of the other officers interjected. Correct, Emily said. He demonstrated precisely the kind of arrogance and lack of situational awareness that gets operators killed in the field. Rather than simply filing a complaint or ignoring it, I chose to use the incident as a teaching opportunity. An opportunity that nearly washed him out of the program, Rollins said. With respect, sir, if he couldn't handle psychological pressure in a training environment, he would have been a liability in operational environments. Better to discover that weakness now than in Kandahar, when lives depend on his composure. Rollins studied her, then Jason. And your assessment now? Emily pulled out a tablet and displayed performance graphs. Recruit Bennett's scores initially dropped 40%, then stabilized, then improved. In week 5, he demonstrated adaptive thinking and psychological resilience superior to baseline. His final evaluation, the hostage rescue scenario, showed tactical proficiency, emotional intelligence, and split-second decision-making under maximum stress. She paused. He also demonstrated the ability to admit error, accept consequences, and evolve beyond his initial limitations. That is the mark of an exceptional operator. Rollins closed the folder. Let me be clear about something, Bennett. What Commander Reese put you through was technically within her authority as a psychological training specialist. But it was unconventional and carried significant risk. You could have washed out. Your career could have ended. Yes, sir. Do you hold any resentment toward Commander Reese? Jason thought about the question, thought about the past 6 weeks, the failures, the humiliation, the slow, painful process of breaking down his ego and rebuilding something better. No, sir, he said finally. She taught me lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. I'm grateful. Something shifted in Emily's expression, a softness that hadn't been there before. Rollins looked around the table at the other officers, nods of agreement. Recruit Bennett, you are hereby removed from probationary status. Your performance is rated as satisfactory with a recommendation for advanced training pipeline. Rollins stood. But understand this. What happened between you and Commander Reese stays in this room. We're not advertising that we run unauthorized psychological experiments on recruits. Understood, sir. Dismissed. Jason stood, saluted, and turned to leave. As he reached the door, Emily spoke. Bennett. He stopped. In my office? 20 minutes. He nodded and left. 20 minutes later, Jason knocked on Emily's door. She opened it and gestured him inside. The office looked different now, less cluttered, more professional. The disguise was completely gone. Emily sat behind her desk and studied him for a long moment. You wanted to see me, ma'am? Stop calling me ma'am. We're both professionals here. She leaned back in her chair. I want you to understand something, Bennett. What I did to you, the psychological pressure, the manipulation, that was real operator tradecraft. The same techniques we use on enemy combatants, I used them on you, I know. But you adapted. Most recruits would have broken down or lashed out. You did neither. You absorbed the pressure, analyzed the pattern, and evolved. She pulled out a file and slid it across the desk. This is a recommendation letter. I'm forwarding you for psychological warfare training after you complete Bud S. You have a talent for understanding how people think under stress. Jason picked up the letter, read the first few lines. Exceptional capacity for psychological resilience, demonstrates advanced emotional intelligence. Recommended for special operations requiring complex human terrain navigation. Why are you doing this? He asked. Because 6 weeks ago, you were a arrogant kid who would have gotten his team killed through overconfidence. Now, you're someone who understands that the most important weapon in special operations isn't your rifle, it's your mind. Emily stood and extended her hand. You earned this, Bennett. He shook her hand. I never apologized properly for what I said in the armory. It was ignorant and cruel. Yes, it was, Emily agreed. But you've apologized through your actions. That's worth more than words. They stood there for a moment, two operators who'd fought a war that nobody else would ever know about. Can I ask you something? Jason said. Go ahead. In the final test, when I shielded you during the firefight, I saw something in your face. Like you were surprised. Emily smiled, a genuine expression. I was. Most recruits would have pushed me aside to get a better shooting position. You sacrificed tactical advantage to keep me safe. That showed character. That was the right call? There is no right call. There's only your call. And yours was driven by the instinct to protect others even at personal cost. That's what makes a good SEAL great. She walked to her window and looked out at the base. 16 hours in Kandahar. I held a position because my team needed time to extract. 38 enemy combatants. I could have retreated, found cover, saved myself. But that wasn't the mission. She turned back to him. You understand now what it means to put the mission above yourself. That's why you passed. Jason nodded. Thank you, Commander, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Your training is just beginning. Bud S will make the last 6 weeks look like summer camp. I'm ready. We'll see. As Jason left her office and walked across the base, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Other recruits were running obstacle courses, doing pull-ups, preparing for their own trials. He thought about the woman in the armory 6 weeks ago, the one he'd dismissed as stupid and insignificant. She'd been neither. She'd been one of the most lethal operators in naval special warfare, hiding in plain sight. And she'd taught him the most important lesson of his career: never underestimate anyone. Respect is not given based on appearance or assumption. It's earned through competence and proven through action. Jason pulled out his phone and sent a text to Marcus. You were right. I was being paranoid. Everything that happened was exactly what I needed, Marcus replied. Glad you figured it out, man. Beer tonight? Jason smiled. Yeah, But first, I have some people to apologize to. He spent the rest of the day tracking down the other recruits he'd treated poorly over the months. The ones he'd dismissed, underestimated, or outright disrespected. One by one, he offered genuine apologies. Some accepted icily, others were skeptical. But all of them saw something different in Jason Bennett now: humility. That evening, Emily returned to her apartment. She made dinner, grilled chicken, vegetables, and ate while reviewing her research notes. The Bennett case study would form the foundation of her new psychological resilience training program, real-world tested, proven effective. She opened her classified file and typed the final assessment. Subject successfully completed psychological resilience evaluation. Demonstrated capacity for growth, adaptation, and self-correction under extreme pressure. Recommend for advancement. Note: initial arrogance stemmed from cultural conditioning and limited exposure to diverse competence. Subject has overcome these limitations through experiential learning. Prognosis: excellent. She saved the file and closed her laptop. Outside her window, San Diego glowed against the night sky. Somewhere in that city, young men and women were dreaming of becoming SEALs. Dreaming of glory and combat and heroism. Emily had lived that dream, had the scars, physical and psychological, to prove it. And now she was ensuring that the next generation would be better prepared than she'd been. Not just physically tough, but mentally resilient. Not just confident, but humble. She thought about Jason Bennett's transformation, from arrogant recruit to thoughtful operator, from someone who judged by appearance to someone who understood that true competence often hides behind unremarkable exteriors. It had been a harsh lesson, but necessary. She finished her dinner, washed her dishes, and sat on her couch with a book. On the wall, that single photo, her graduating Bud S class, taken 6 months after her actual graduation, when they'd integrated women publicly. She wasn't in it. Her achievement remained classified. But for the first time in years, that didn't bother her, because Jason Bennett knew, and he'd learned what it meant to face an opponent you'd underestimated. The quiet professionals were the most dangerous. The invisible warriors were the ones who changed everything, and Emily Reese had proven that once again. Not through loud declarations or public demonstrations, but through surgical precision and psychological warfare conducted in the shadows where real operators lived. She smiled to herself and returned to her book. Tomorrow, there would be new recruits, new lessons to teach, new arrogance to dismantle. But tonight, she'd rest knowing that one more operator understood what it truly meant to be a SEAL. And that was victory enough.